So the conflict in Libya, not many people are talking about this, but it warrants extensive coverage. You know, after 2011, when the US and NATO toppled Gaddafi, I mean, the whole country turned into a giant mess. Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, their legacy is bringing back slavery to the 21st century. All right. You've seen the open slave trade markets in Libya. I mean, it's an absolute disaster. They really destroyed this country. Every time they see an independent socialist Arab country standing on its own 2 feet, they can't leave it alone. They have to come and destroy, because that's what imperialists do. And so that's what they've been trying to do with Syria. And now Libya has been in limbo for almost a decade. And I'm going to try to explain the current conflict as simply as possible. Take a look at this map, all right? So over here in yellow, you have the LNA, which is the Libyan National Army. And this is headed by General Haftar, okay? Now, Haftar, he has the backing of Egypt, of Russia, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and he has control of all of the main oil fields. All right, so if you take a look at this map over here of Libya's oil wealth, you can see all of these oil fields here. They're under his control, all right, under the control of the LNA, Libyan National Army. And the opposing faction is headed by a man called al-sarraj, okay? So he has the backing of the UN. He's recognized as the official representative of Libya at the UN, and he also has the backing of Turkey, right? So Sarraj, he doesn't have control of the oil fields. However, he does have control of ports to the west, though. And the ports are where you find the refineries and the storage for oil, like the port town of Sirt over here. Now, if you look here, these orange lines, these are the gas pipelines, and the black lines are the oil pipelines, okay? So make no mistake, there is a considerable battle here over the country's resources. I mean, you mustn't forget that 94% of Libya's wealth comes from oil. Its entire economy is dependent on oil. You've heard me talk in the past about Syria's revenue. So 25% of the government's revenue used to come from oil, okay? These are the oil fields that the United States is occupying now, so they can cripple her from rebuilding. And in Syria's 25% of the government's revenue, we're talking about 94% here. This is no joke. This is no joke. And so Sarraj essentially has control of everything in blue here, okay? And he's also known as the GNA, right? The Government of National Accord. In Arabic, that's the Hukumat al-Wifaq. And as I said, he has the backing of Turkey. And this is very important, because what has Turkey been doing? What Turkey has been doing, what Erdogan has been doing, is taking all of these battle-hardened jihadists that have been holed up in Idlib, which is a terrorist cesspit. You have about 20,000 fighters there. And he's been shipping off some of them to Libya to fight over there, so he can establish a foothold in Libya. And we're not talking a few dozen fighters here. We're talking thousands, somewhere around 16,000 up till now. So you can take a look at this. This is back in January. 2,000 Syria fighters arrive in Libya to confront Haftar's forces, all right? And when they say Syria fighters here in the title, they're talking Turkish-backed militias. And then over here, this is from July 14th. Turkey sent over 1,000 militants to Libya just in the past few days. And then another report. Turkey sent up to 3,800 fighters to Libya. This is just yesterday. And they also have their own military there. So not just mercenaries. And pay attention to this. The report comes as the conflict in oil-rich Libya has escalated into a regional proxy war, fueled by foreign powers pouring weapons and mercenaries into the country. So as you can see here, Turkey paid and offered citizenship to thousands of mercenaries fighting alongside Tripoli-based militias against troops of East Libya-based commander Haftar. I mean, this is insane. Okay. They know that there are tons of young Syrian men who have been displaced by the conflict. The entire country has been reduced to rubble. They have no prospects. They have no jobs. They're living in a war zone. And so they are using them. They're exploiting them by offering them these very nice salaries, something around $2,500 a month, and citizenship, and essentially sending them off to their deaths to fight in Libya. So not only is Turkey illegally occupying northern Syria, funding jihadists, funding other militias that have been responsible for ethnically cleansing Assyrians, Christians, Kurds, but on top of it, now they're getting involved in Libya, sending off men to their deaths. And as I pointed out earlier, Erdogan is also trying to provoke a war between Azerbaijan and Armenia. This is all part of his expansionism, right? His self-deluded fantasy that he's going to revive the Ottoman Empire or something. I mean, this is ridiculous. And so if you look at the map over here, I mean, what he's essentially trying to do is create an axis of influence ranging all the way from northern Syria over here, Idlib, and stretching all the way over to Libya, which not only would give him control over the Mediterranean Sea, but also any oil or gas pipelines that would pass underneath. So he can control this entire region here. Now, it's important to note, we're not just talking about Turkish-backed militias and mercenaries and jihadists being sent over to Libya. There's also Sudanese men who have essentially been kidnapped and forced into this combat and forced into this fight. I mean, look at this. Over here, the headline reads, the Sudanese government begins proceedings to prosecute Emirati Black Shield, which is a firm accused of forcing Sudanese to fight in Yemen and Libya. So what they've done essentially, they lied to these men. You know, they told them that if you sign this contract and you come with us, we'll take you over to Libya and you'll work as security guards or something. And it turns out they're throwing them into a war as mercenaries, confiscating their mobile phones, confiscating their IDs and their passports so they can't leave. This is sick. This is insanity. And it's very reminiscent of what Qatar has been doing with migrant workers, right? Coming to build those stadiums for the World Cup, also confiscating their IDs and passports so they can't leave, making them work in horrendous conditions, many of them dying. This is no different. This is enslavement. This is exploitation. It's disgusting. You see that recently, the United Arab Emirates company Black Shield said in a statement of which the Anadolu agency obtained a copy that it is a private security services company and denied all allegations of deceiving its workers regarding the nature of the work, its system, its location, or its employees. Yeah, I'm sure that Blackwater would say the same thing, or Silvercore, or whatever the hell these companies are called now. They keep changing their names. I mean, they all call themselves private security firms. They're mercenaries. These are corporations that help train and deploy mercenaries all across the world, like shadow armies. They all call themselves security firms. Now, General Haftar, who again has the backing of Egypt, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Arab Emirates, he started losing more territory. And so now he's gone to ask for help from Sisi, from Egypt, right? And so just a few hours ago, the Egyptian parliament voted to deploy the Egyptian army in Libya. Take a look. So Egypt's parliament approves troop deployment to Libya. The parliament unanimously approved the deployment of members of the Egyptian armed forces on combat missions outside Egypt's borders to defend Egyptian national security against criminal armed militias and foreign terrorist elements. The deployment would be made on a quote-unquote Western front, a likely reference to Western neighbor Libya. The move could bring Egypt and Turkey, which support rival sides in Libya's chaotic proxy war, into direct confrontation. So Egypt have made it clear that they're not going to be installing any bases there, but they are going to be sending troops, and they also have been providing training to the tribes that are actually in the southern part of Libya. So take a look at the map over here. The area in green. Okay, so this area is controlled by tribesmen, and Egypt has been providing training to them. Egypt is deploying troops here is because this entire situation is a security threat, right? Remember, Egypt and Libya share a border right here. And so, you have a bunch of jihadists and battle-hardened mercenaries coming over, pouring in from Syria, sitting right across their border. That's not going to bode well for them. I don't think any nation on this planet would exactly be appreciative of that. And so they're trying to create a buffer between themselves and this conflict. And another thing to consider is that they don't want Turkish influence. They don't want a Turkish sphere of influence or Erdogan sticking his nose in this region, which is primarily an Arab region. They're not too content with him bringing in not just mercenaries, but also his conventional armed forces and trying to establish a foothold there. Now, regarding the US, they're effectively trying to play both sides. And it doesn't stop there. Of course, the Zionist occupation, they're involved too. If you recall, I covered these planes that were coming over from the United Arab Emirates containing medical and humanitarian aid for the Palestinians. And the Palestinians said, no, we don't want them. Because they knew what's going on. The UAE are just trying to normalize relations with Israel and using this as a cover. And not only that, not only are they trying to normalize relations with Israel, but they're also using these planes, landing them in Israel, filling them up with weaponry, and then moving it all to Libya, over here. Al-Jafra Air Base, which is controlled by Haftar. And this airbase, if I recall correctly, it was destroyed in 2011 by the French. They bombed it, but now it's operational and it's under the command of the LNA. So, I mean, you can tell already this whole conflict is a giant mess. It's one giant salad. Very reminiscent of what's going on in Syria. I mean, it's a proxy war with 15 different actors. I mean, it's just a goddamn mess. And just what a shame, man. I mean, look what they did to Libya. Look at what they did to this country, man. Is this better? This is the Arab Spring that they speak of. يا أولادين الحرام شو عملتوا فينا شو عملتوا بالعرب. عن جد يعني ببكي الشيء والله ببكي. No one is saying that Gaddafi or any of these Arab leaders are perfect, but you call this better? This ain't better. This is white people bullshit. Okay, this is NATO, this is the EU, this is Western European powers, this is the US meddling in other people's affairs. Mind your fucking business. We don't want your democracy. We don't want your fucking ideals. We don't want your Monroe Doctrine. We don't want your hegemony. We don't want nothing to do with you. Go and fuck yourselves. Okay? They don't know when to quit. They just don't know when to quit. This is heartbreaking. Libya was way better off. Syria was way better off than this shit. Arab Spring, my ass. I ain't no Arab Spring. It's a fucking CIA op. All right? Every time they see independent, socialist, self-sufficient Arab countries, they have to come and shit on them and dismantle them and destroy them and reduce them to rubble. That is evil incarnate, okay? That has nothing to do with democracy. That has nothing to do with human rights. That has nothing to do with a liberation. Every single thing they tell you that they are advocating, they're doing the complete opposite. Every single thing. To the point where it's even in the names of their organizations and laws, right? When they tell you CARES Act, it means we don't care about you. When they tell you Patriot Act, it means it's unpatriotic. When they tell you Heroes Act, we're the villains. When they tell you National Endowment for Democracy, they mean imperialism, oppression, colonialism, CIA-funded shit. Leave us the fuck alone. Why do people have to die for this shit? So motherfuckers can get rich? And, just on a final note, I can assure you, the next iteration of Russiagate, you know what that's going to be? They're going to, just like they found some kind of reason to stall their retreat from Afghanistan, their departure. They will accuse Russia of doing something in Libya, and then that way they can start expanding AFRICOM's operations, and you'll see.